I watched my son's face drain of every drop of color when the sheriff handed him the eviction notice. Behind me stood the actual property owner, me, and behind him stood the couple he'd been illegally collecting rent from for 3 months. The same couple who'd been kind enough to call me in my hospital bed and tell me what was really happening to my house. My name is Diane Mitchell. I'm 72 years old. And I want to tell you about the day I discovered that nearly dying wasn't the worst thing that happened to me this year. Before we get into this, I'd love to know, where are you watching this from? Drop your location in the comments. I'm telling you this story because I need you to understand that sometimes the people who hurt us most are the ones we raised with our own hands. Let me take you back to March of this year. I'd been living in my 3-bedroom colonial in Portland, Oregon for 42 years. My late husband David and I bought it in 1982 when our son Trevor was just 2 years old. We raised him in that house. Every bedroom had memories painted on the walls. David passed 8 years ago, and I'd lived alone since then, perfectly content with my garden, my book club, and my weekly dinners with Trevor and his wife Shayna. I thought I was one of the lucky ones. My son visited every Sunday. He mowed my lawn without being asked. He fixed my leaky faucet last fall. Shayna baked me banana bread every other week, my favorite. When they'd been married 5 years ago, I'd given them a substantial gift of $25,000 to help with their down payment. I thought we were close. I thought I knew them. March 19th changed everything. I was in my kitchen making coffee when the right side of my body stopped working. Just stopped. The mug slipped from my hand and shattered on the tile floor, but I couldn't look down at it because my neck wouldn't turn. I tried to call out, but my words came out slurred and wrong. I managed to hit the medical alert button I wore around my neck, the one Trevor had insisted I get 6 months earlier. Now I understand why he was so adamant about it. He was planning ahead. The paramedics arrived within 8 minutes. By the time they loaded me into the ambulance, I couldn't feel the entire right side of my body. The ER doctor told me later I was having a significant ischemic stroke. They administered the clot-busting medication just in time. The doctor said another 20 minutes, and I might not have made it, or I would have had permanent severe damage. I spent 4 days in the ICU. Trevor and Shayna visited twice. Trevor held my hand on day 2 and told me not to worry about anything. He said he'd take care of everything. He said I should focus on getting better and not stress about the house or bills or any of it. He took my house keys from my purse, said he needed them to check on things, water my plants, get my mail. I was so grateful. I squeezed his hand with my left one, the only one that still worked properly. And I felt tears run down my face because I thought my son loved me. What a fool I was. They transferred me to a rehabilitation facility on March 23rd. The place was called Riverside Recovery Center, and it was where I'd spend the next 3 months learning how to walk again, how to use my right hand again, how to speak clearly again. The first week was the hardest. I couldn't shower myself. I couldn't cut my own food. I needed help getting dressed, help using the bathroom, help with everything that I'd been doing independently for 7 decades. The loss of dignity was crushing. I'd lie in that hospital bed at night, staring at the ceiling, listening to other patients crying or calling for nurses, feeling like my body had betrayed me, wondering if I'd ever go home again. The other patients became my community. There was Martha in the room next to mine, recovering from a car accident. James down the hall was relearning to speak after his second stroke. We'd encourage each other during therapy sessions, celebrate tiny victories like taking 3 steps without assistance or buttoning a shirt with one hand. These strangers became my support system because my own son couldn't be bothered to show up. Trevor visited me on March 25th, just that once in the first 2 weeks. He stood at the foot of my bed with his hands in his pockets and told me the rehabilitation was going to take a long time. He said the doctors told him I might be there for 6 months, maybe longer. That wasn't what my doctors told me, but I was so foggy from medications and exhaustion that I just nodded. He said I shouldn't worry about the house. He'd make sure everything was taken care of. Then he said something that didn't quite register at the time. He said, "Mom, you know that big house is just sitting there empty. It seems like such a waste of space and utilities." I mumbled something about it being fine that I'd be home soon. He smiled. this tight smile that didn't reach his eyes, and said, "Sure, Mom, sure you will." He left after 15 minutes. Shayna never came at all during those first 3 weeks. When I asked Trevor about her during his one brief phone call, he said she was busy with work, too busy to visit her mother-in-law recovering from a stroke. That should have told me something. April came, and my rehabilitation was progressing better than expected. I was walking with a walker. My speech was improving every day. My right hand was getting stronger. My physical therapist, Marcus, told me I was one of his star patients. He said, if I kept working this hard, I could potentially go home by early June, maybe even late May. I was so focused on my recovery that I didn't think much about the house. I assumed it was just sitting there waiting for me. My mortgage had been paid off for 15 years, so there were no payments to worry about. I had automatic bill pay set up for utilities. Trevor had access to my accounts to handle anything that came up. I'd given him power of attorney years ago when David died, just in case something like this ever happened. I trusted him with everything I had. On April 7th, I got a phone call that changed everything. I was in my room after lunch practicing my hand exercises when my cell phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize, local area code. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Mrs. Mitchell, a woman's voice, youngish, uncertain. Yes, this is Diane, Mrs. Mitchell. My name is Amanda Torres. I'm calling because I think there's something you should know. My husband and I were renting your house on Maple Street. I went completely still. I'm sorry. What? We're renting your house? We moved in on April 1st. Your son, Trevor, he's the one who showed us the property and handled everything. We signed a lease with him and his wife, Shayna. But Mrs. Mitchell, something doesn't feel right about this whole situation. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. What do you mean you're renting my house? I'm recovering from a stroke. I'm coming home soon. There was a long pause. Then Amanda said very quietly, Mrs. Mitchell, Trevor told us the house belonged to him and his wife. He said they inherited it recently. He never mentioned you at all. The room started spinning. I gripped the edge of my bed with my good hand. Are you there right now? I asked. In my house? Yes, Mrs. Mitchell, I'm so sorry. When we moved in, I found some things. Photos, documents in a drawer in the bedroom, photos of you and an older man dated just a few years ago, documents with your name on them, tax papers from last year. I started putting things together and realized something was very wrong. I found your phone number on one of those documents. Trevor doesn't know I'm calling you. I want to pause here for just a second. If you're finding this story unbelievable, if you're thinking there's no way someone could do this to their own mother, please hit that subscribe button, because what happens next is going to show you just how far greed and betrayal can go, even within families. And trust me, you won't want to miss how this ends. Amanda, I said, my voice shaking, can you tell me exactly what's happening? Every detail? Over the next 30 minutes, Amanda Torres told me everything. She and her husband, Carlos, had been looking for a rental house in a nice neighborhood. They'd found the listing on Craigslist, my house, advertised for $2,000 a month. Trevor had shown them the property, told them it belonged to him and Shayna, said they'd inherited it, and decided to rent it out for extra income. He'd seemed professional, friendly, showed them around like he owned the place. They'd signed a lease, paid first month's rent, last month's rent, and a security deposit. $5,000 total, cash, handed directly to Trevor. Amanda said Trevor and Shayna had cleared out a lot of my personal belongings, but left some furniture. They told the Torres couple the furniture came with the house. What they'd actually done was box up my most personal items, my photos, David's belongings, my jewelry, my documents, and stored them somewhere else. They'd staged my home like a rental property. They'd even removed my prescription bottles from the bathroom cabinet, my reading glasses from the nightstand, every trace that I'd been living there just weeks before. But they'd made mistakes. Amanda found my reading journal tucked behind books on the shelf with entries dated just 2 weeks before my stroke. She found mail addressed to me that had been shoved in a kitchen drawer. She found the property tax statement from last year with my name on it. And most damning of all, she found our wedding album in a box in the closet filled with photos of me and David from 1980. My name written in my own handwriting on the first page. Mrs. Mitchell, Amanda said, her voice thick with emotion. Carlos and I are good people. We work hard. We don't want to be part of something illegal. When I realized what was happening, I knew I had to tell you. We have 3 kids. We can't afford to get caught up in fraud. But more than that, this is just wrong. What he's doing to you is evil. I was crying by then, ugly crying, the kind where you can't catch your breath. A nurse came in and found me sobbing into the phone. She tried to take it away, but I held on tight. Amanda, I managed to say, thank you for calling me. Thank you for being honest. Can you do me a favor? Can you document everything? Take photos of the lease, any messages with Trevor, anything you have. I already did, she said. I took pictures of everything yesterday. I have it all saved. That's when I knew Amanda Torres was an angel sent to save me from being robbed by my own child. After I hung up, I sat in that hospital room and felt something I'd never experienced before. It wasn't just anger, it wasn't just hurt. It was this cold, clear understanding that the person I'd raised, the baby I'd nursed, and the child I'd comforted, and the young man I'd sent to college, had looked at me lying in a hospital bed and seen an opportunity. He decided I was done, used up. He'd written me off like I was already dead and moved on to claiming his inheritance early. For about an hour, I let myself fall apart. I cried until my head pounded and my ribs ached. Then I called my physical therapist and told him I needed to work harder. I needed to get strong enough to go home and handle this myself. Marcus looked at me strangely but said, okay. The next day, I called my attorney, Robert Chen. No, wait, Robert Sullivan. I'd known Robert for 20 years. He'd handled David's estate and my will. I told him everything, every detail Amanda had given me. I could hear him breathing hard on the other end of the line. Diane, he said, this is serious fraud. This is elder abuse. This is potentially criminal. I know, I said. What do I do? Robert said the first thing was to revoke Trevor's power of attorney immediately, which he could file for me. The second thing was to document everything. The third thing was to contact the police. But he suggested we gather all our evidence first and present a complete case. Over the next 3 weeks, I worked with Robert while pushing myself in physical therapy, like my life depended on it. Amanda Torres became my inside source. She'd text me photos of everything. The lease Trevor had drawn up on some generic template he'd printed off the internet. The Craigslist listing, his text messages about the rent being due. She told me Trevor came by once to collect May's rent, another $2,000 in cash. He told them to always pay in cash. No checks, no paper trail. He'd even given them a fake receipt book, the kind you can buy at any office supply store, so it looked official. My son was stupid and greedy, a terrible combination. I also learned from Amanda that Trevor and Shayna had told their friends they were house-sitting for me while I recovered. They'd been throwing parties at my house. My neighbors had seen cars parked up and down the street on weekends. Mrs. Patterson next door had asked Trevor if everything was okay, if I was coming home soon. Trevor had told her the prognosis wasn't good, that I'd probably need to go into permanent care. He'd actually stood on my front porch and told my neighbor of 20 years that I was never coming home. He'd been telling people I was dying, while I was fighting every single day to get stronger, to prove the doctors wrong about recovery timelines. My son was out there planning my funeral and spending my money. I also discovered through Amanda that Shayna had been using my kitchen, cooking meals with my pots and pans, having her friends over for wine nights in my living room. They'd treated my home like their personal vacation house. The disrespect wasn't just financial, it was complete eraser of my existence. By early May, I was walking without the walker. My right hand could grip things again. My speech was clear. My doctor said I was recovering remarkably well, that I could likely go home by mid-May if I continued to progress. He seemed surprised by my rapid improvement. He didn't know I was fueled by pure rage and determination. Robert Sullivan built the case carefully. We had Amanda's evidence. We pulled my bank records and saw where Trevor had been withdrawing cash. He'd made several large withdrawals over the past 2 months. We contacted my homeowner's insurance company and discovered Trevor had called them, claiming to be handling my affairs, asking about the policy details. We documented everything. Then Robert contacted the Portland Police Department and explained the situation. Because this involved fraud, elder abuse, and illegal rental activity, they took it seriously. A detective named Sarah Morrison was assigned to the case. She interviewed me by phone, reviewed all our evidence, and told me she'd coordinate with us for when I was ready to return home. Mrs. Mitchell. Detective Morrison said, "What your son did is not only morally reprehensible, it's criminal. We're going to make sure this is handled appropriately." I scheduled my discharge for May 18th. Robert arranged everything with surgical precision. We coordinated with Detective Morrison. We made sure Amanda and Carlos knew exactly when to expect us. I didn't tell Trevor I was coming home. As far as he knew, I was still struggling in rehab, still weak, still not a threat. May 18th arrived on a Tuesday morning. I was dressed in real clothes for the first time in 2 months. Jeans, a sweater, comfortable shoes. I'd lost 15 LEBs and my hair had gone grayer, but I felt stronger than I had in years. Robert picked me up from Riverside Recovery at 9 in the morning. We drove to the police station where Detective Morrison was waiting with 2 uniformed officers and the paperwork for Trevor's arrest. At 10:30, we pulled up to my house. My house, the home I'd lived in for 42 years, the place where I'd raised my son, the walls that held every memory of my marriage. There was a strange car in the driveway, Amanda and Carlos's sedan. The lawn had been mowed recently. My flower beds looked weedy and neglected. But the house itself looked the same. It looked like home. Robert helped me out of his car. The police cruiser pulled up behind us. Amanda opened the front door, my front door, and stepped out onto the porch. Her eyes were red like she'd been crying. "Mrs. Mitchell," she said, her voice shaking, "he's here. Trevor came by an hour ago to collect June's rent early. He's inside right now." Detective Morrison nodded to the uniformed officers. One of them handed me my house keys. Amanda had made copies and given them to Robert last week as evidence. I held those keys in my hand, feeling their weight. "Are you ready?" Robert asked me quietly. I looked at him, this kind man who'd been David's friend and mine for 2 decades. I've never been more ready for anything in my life. I unlocked my front door and walked into my own house. The living room looked different. They'd rearranged the furniture. My wedding photo that used to hang above the fireplace was gone. In its place was some generic beach scene print from Home Goods. I could smell someone else's cooking, someone else's life being lived in my space. I heard voices from the kitchen. Trevor's laugh. Shayna saying something about going out to dinner later. I walked through my living room, past my dining room, and stood in the doorway of my kitchen. Trevor was sitting at my kitchen table, the table David and I had bought 30 years ago, the table where we'd eaten thousands of family dinners. He was counting cash, $100 bills spread out in front of him. Shayna was standing at the counter drinking coffee from my favorite mug, the one that said, "World's Best Mom," that Trevor had given me for Mother's Day when he was 12. They didn't see me at first. Trevor was saying, "That's $4,000 for May and June. These idiots are so easy. They believe everything I tell them." That's when I spoke. "Hello, Trevor. I've never seen someone go from relaxed to terrified so fast." His head snapped up, and I watched his face go from normal color to white to gray, like I was watching the life drain out of him in real time. The cash slipped from his hands and scattered across the table. Shayna dropped the mug. It shattered on the floor, coffee spraying everywhere. "Mom." Trevor's voice came out strangled. "What are you? How are you home?" I finished for him. "I'm home, Trevor, in my house. The house you've been illegally renting to people while telling them you inherited it. The house where you've been collecting cash payments and throwing parties and living your best life while I fought to relearn how to walk." He stood up so fast his chair fell backward. "Mom, I can explain. Save it." I stepped aside, and Detective Morrison walked into the kitchen, followed by the 2 uniformed officers. "These people would like to talk to you about fraud, elder abuse, and theft." Trevor's eyes went so wide I could see white all around them. Shayna made a sound like a wounded animal. Mrs. Mitchell. Detective Morrison said formally, "Can you confirm this man is Trevor Mitchell and that he has been unlawfully leasing your property without your knowledge or consent while you were recovering from a medical emergency?" "I can confirm that," I said. My voice didn't shake, not once. "Trevor Mitchell," Detective Morrison continued, "you're under arrest for fraud, elder abuse, and theft by deception." The officer pulled out handcuffs. That's when Trevor started babbling. "Mom, please. You don't understand. We needed the money. Shayna lost her job. We have bills. I was going to tell you. I was going to give you the money. This is all a misunderstanding. Mom, please. I'm your son." I looked at this man, this stranger wearing my son's face, and I felt nothing but cold disgust. My son died the day he decided to steal from his mother while she lay in a hospital bed. I said, "My son died when he told people I was never coming back, that I was too far gone to matter anymore. You're not my son. You're a thief who happens to share my DNA." They put the handcuffs on him. Shayna was crying, saying she didn't know. She wasn't part of it, but Amanda had text messages from Shayna too, coordinating showings and discussing the rental income. They arrested her as well. As the officers led them out, Trevor looked back at me one more time. "Mom, I'm sorry. Please don't do this." I didn't respond. I just watched him being walked out of my house in handcuffs. Amanda and Carlos were standing in the living room with Robert. Amanda was crying. "Mrs. Mitchell, we'll move out immediately.